Well, welcome back to this second half hour of our forum featuring the candidates for the City Council at large. As we mentioned, there is a second citywide race on the ballot for an at-large seat, and this is the second half that will focus on that race, which is Division 2. We have with us 4 of the 5 candidates in that race. David Baird, who is running as a Republican, Aaron Christopher, who is running as an independent, David Gregory Nowak, who is running as a Democrat, and incumbent Jason Williams, also a Democrat. We do want to mention that candidate Jason Coleman was invited but declined because he works for FEMA and is currently in Florida. So we'll have the same general rules for this half of the program with 1-minute responses to the questions and then 45 seconds for some closing statements. So thank you to all of you for being here. We are going to get to the first question right away, and of course, top issue, I'm sure most of you can guess what it is. We're going to begin with a question about the crisis at the Sewerage and Water Board. Now, in our WWL Advocate poll this week, while 51% of those surveyed placed the blame at the hands of the board itself, 22% also faulted the mayor and the city council. So where do you lay the blame, and what is one specific thing you will do to correct that problem? Mr. Baird, we'll start with you.
Well, Natalie, I've actually called for the state to actually take over the Sewer and Water Board on a temporary basis, because I don't believe we can trust our leadership here in the city at this point in time. Given the fact that the past has been replete with taking money away, there has been corruption within the board. The past board has had people that have been put in prison. And given that, and given the amount of money that is coming through the funnel from FEMA in the future, I just don't believe that we can trust this leadership that's in place. And given the fact that we've just seen a change of leadership at the top. So given all these factors, I believe as what happened with the school board, the state is in a position to help assist the city to implement a change at the top.
All right. Mr. Christopher, we're going to go to you next.
Sure. I believe that the issue with the Sewage and Water Board is more or less an issue of accounting and accountability. If we can, I also believe that we need to be more aggressive and defensive as far as flood protection. There's a plethora of research out there and things being done around the world, around the nation, to protect other cities against flooding. And being granted the type of flooding that we have, I believe that we should be implementing them all. As far as the oversight of Sewage and Water Board, I believe that we need to examine what's working and what isn't working. I know everyone always speaks on transparency and stuff like that. And I mean, getting information from city government has been a major issue in every department. And so to be clear, I believe that in order to improve Sewage and Water Board, we need to bring it back under city control and also have a sense of urgency with it.
All right, and that is the noise you'll hear at the end of the minute. I did not say that initially. All right, Mr. Nowak.
Well, I think that poll that you had for your respondents might actually be a harder choice than the current mayoral lineup of 18 candidates. I think there's a lot of blame to go around, certainly. When we talk about the Sewage and Water Board, many of these problems were apparent going back decades, and yet I think in a lot of ways they lied and obfuscated about what the actual issues were. I think they were more concerned about padding their pensions than they were about ensuring the safety of our citizenry. When it comes to the mayor, a lot of these reforms where they put Cedric Grant in charge and took council members off the board, that was specifically under his request. And I think when you're the leader of the city, you have to take responsibility and account for those decisions that you pushed on the state legislature. But when it comes to city council, I think that they also failed in their oversight capacities. I mean, their primary responsibility as a utility regulator is to provide that oversight of Sewage and Water Boards. So I think that there's a lot of blame to go around, but certainly it's time to put Sewage and Water Board under city control.
All right, and Mr. Williams.
Natalie, I believe that Mr. Christopher is absolutely right about a need for a sense of urgency. And I had a sense for urgency on that Saturday night of the floods when I called the very next day a special council meeting to deal with what Mr. Nowak just brought up, was the lies and obfuscations of the head of Sewage and Water Board. They were lying to the mayor, they were lying to the citizens. And I could tell that because I was in those flooded streets talking to neighbors, and they were saying that the water was not moving until 10 o'clock at the very same time when Cedric Grant was telling us this was a new normal and that the pumps were working at 100%. Nothing ever works at 100%. So we knew something was wrong there. I called that special meeting, I uncovered those lies, and I've had a sense of urgency ever since that has happened. And we've called other special meetings. There'll be another special meeting next week to find out where we are now with this interim management system, to find out what their plan is for Nate and for the next storms that will be coming our way.
All right, and Mr. Nowak, I just want to go back to you quickly. So clearly you have a lot of ideas of where to place the blame. What's something specific that could be done to fix it?
With the Sewage and Water Board, I think the number one thing in my research, the budget for the Office of Inspector General is very, very tiny, considering we have over $1 billion in revenue that the city raises. It's 0.6% of the general fund, which is after other allotments are made. I think we need to dramatically increase that to ensure that their mandate of rooting out waste and corruption and recommending fraud for prosecution is there, because when the transparency is there for citizenry, then we can trust that the money is going the right place.
Thank you for that. And we're going to stick with this topic. Another question about the Sewerage and Water Board. We asked candidates in the first half hour whether they would be in favor of a stormwater management fee to fund some improvements. Would you be in favor of that fee? And if so, how would you sell it to voters? And if not, what would you do instead to raise that revenue? And Mr. Christopher, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm not in favor of any form of taxing the citizens of the city of New Orleans any further. I believe that our accounting practices are terrible as far as the city government, and I believe that we already have the funding to better assist with that issue. I firmly believe that if we bring in some people who are knowledgeable and who are also diligent in their work, that we can actually get the job done with the resources that we have.
All right.
Stormwater drainage fee I've seen coming up as a policy proposal across the partisan divide across the city. There's a lot of people that think it is the way to fund our infrastructure repairs. To get a proper drainage system, a 21st century drainage system, the cost is going to be into the billions of dollars, and so I understand that there needs to be new thoughts on revenue, on how to do that, but my primary issue with the stormwater drainage fee is I think it thinks of billions of gallons of fresh water falling from the sky as a wastewater instead of an actual resource. Clean, drinkable water may be the limiting resource of the 21st century. I think we need to rethink how we deal with water, and certainly the drainage system does not allow enough water to go into the groundwater system. That's causing subsidence in our streets. So I think the way that we address it, obviously I'm open to new funding mechanisms, but at the same time I think that the fundamental principle behind it is flawed, and then thinking of water as a waste product instead of a resource.
And what's your take on the fee?
No, I think it's really tough to go to citizens and ask for more money to pay for something else when they can't trust how money is being spent right now. So rather than do that, I would be more encouraging of a tax fairness across the board. Nonprofits that have for-profit properties, having them pay their fair share of the resources they demand from the city, the archdiocese, our large universities, any nonprofit that is turning a profit with their institution. I think we need to look in that area because there's a lot of money left on the table that we can use for these infrastructure improvements. But we shouldn't do anything until we get that third-party independent assessment of the Sewage and Water Board from top down. Nobody from the mayor's office, nobody from the council office, someone from out of the country, someone from in the country, but an expert to look at what is going on here before we start trying to decide how we want to spend any more money on it.
All right, and Mr. Baird.
Well, I wanted to add, we're spending $4.5 million for the IG's office next year's budget, but in terms of our wastewater, I'd like to see more green projects going forward instead of adding a fee to our citizens. Before we do that, I'd like to see us propose more green projects, using this wastewater for parks and other kinds of ideas instead of just putting out a flat fee.
All right, well, we are going to move on to another topic that is also very important, crime in the city. In our recent WWL Advocate poll, voters did list crime as the #1 issue in this election. And with that in mind, and of course in light of the tragedy that we just saw in Las Vegas this week, we want to ask you about illegal guns on the streets of New Orleans. Would you be in favor of an assault weapon ban, an idea that was floated in the city about 10 years ago but didn't end up going anywhere? And if not, what specific strategies would you propose to reduce the number of illegal guns that we do have on the street? And Mr. Nowak, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, so obviously gun violence is reaching epic proportions, not just in New Orleans, but our country as a whole. We have had more deaths from gun violence and from self-inflicted gunshot wounds across our country than we've lost people in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think it's time that we need to elevate the national conversation. Assault weapon ban in New Orleans does nothing to prevent weapons being illegally smuggled in from Texas or Mississippi. We are not an insular society. Certainly I'm looking to our Representative Cedric Richmond to show some leadership on that in the national level. But when it comes down to gun violence, again, I think a lot of times it has to do with our laws as they are. Obviously, Las Vegas shooting is different, but most gun violence is mostly just fighting over drug territories, and we need to assess the war on drugs and how we are addressing nonviolent drug offenses. New Orleans is the incarceration capital of the world, and we need to change that as well. All
right, Mr. Williams.
Absolutely, 100% I am in support of an assault weapons ban in the city of New Orleans. I supported it 10 years ago when it first came up. There is no place for an assault weapon on a city street. There is no place for a hunting rifle outside of a box on a city street. I completely agree with the right to bear arms, but there simply is no purpose for an assault weapon in an urban environment, and I am 100% supportive of that and will go anywhere, any day to argue that case.
All right. Do you think it would make a difference for the city to do that on its own? Does it send a message and it kind of becomes a mental thing?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, of course, David's right. Somebody can get a gun at a Walmart in Texas and come in to the city of New Orleans, but I think it does send a strong message. There has to be one city that's going to be strong enough to take that stand. I don't know how many people have to get killed in a matter of a few minutes in order for us to understand that there is something wrong with the way that we view gun ownership in this country. And I would be proud to have the city of New Orleans take that first step.
All right, Mr. Baird.
People are still struggling to get their weapons back after Katrina was legal gun ownership under the Second Amendment. I'd say that we need to support our police, and people that are illegally possessing firearms that are felons need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And the people that do possess these weapons tend to be felons in possession of firearms. So I'd say more in support of the police that are trying to prosecute felons that do have these weapons is the issue.
So you would not be in favor of an assault weapon ban for the city?
I'd say that is not the issue.
All right, and Mr. Christopher.
Well, I'm rather conservative. I'm a constitutionalist, so I support the Second Amendment. However, I don't feel there is a need for assault rifles in an urban environment, as Councilmember Williams suggested. I do believe that if we're going to attack the crime issue, then we need to account for the real issues such as the economic disparities and the educational disparities in the city of New Orleans. Most of the people committing these crimes are 120% below the poverty level. And so if we address those issues and give them an opportunity to become productive members in societies, I believe that we can actually see a decrease in crime. And we don't have to create a police state for the city of New Orleans because we have productive citizens.
All righty, we are going to discuss a budget-related question now, which is of course important since that's one of the council's main functions, voting on the budget. So we talk a lot about areas of the budget that are a challenge to try and fund. So what is one area in which you think the city is currently overspending? Mr. Williams.
We are overspending in the criminal justice system because we're dealing with the manifestation of root causes that we're ignoring. We're not investing enough in people to get better outcomes. We're not investing enough in mental health. We're not investing in early child care. We're not investing in programs that can allow us to get better results from our young people and from our mentally challenged community. Very recently, I argued to have money go to start a New Orleans Therapeutic Day program, which helps kids with emotional disturbances and mental health needs. Some of that money comes from the City of New Orleans, the Youth Opportunity Center. But what the program does is if a kid suffers an incident, whether they see someone harmed or post-traumatic stress, they go to that program, they get the help they need, they learn tools to cope, and they go back to their regular school setting. We need more programs like this, adult literacy programs like YEP with Melissa Sawyer on O.C. Haley. These are the programs that will stop people from finding themselves in the criminal justice system, that will reduce the amount we have to spend on the back end.
Okay, so that was just to clarify, we're overspending on the criminal aspect on the front end, but we need to...
Overspending on the back end of the criminal justice system
Right.
on the results of not spending money on people on the front end.
All right, and Mr. Baird.
I think we're spending a lot of money on our administrative budget right now in the city of New Orleans, especially at the top. The mayor implemented a whole bunch of top-end positions, and I don't know where all of that money is really benefiting the citizens of the city right now. We've got to take a look at how that is budgeted. The budget right now has panned out over the last 8 years during the mayor's tenure. I see that now we've really not gained anything, especially down at the bottom level at the city's employees. A lot of them have never received any pay raises over the last 8 years. A lot of people at the top have received a lot more money. So I would say that administrative budget needs to be looked at a little bit more strongly.
All right, and Mr. Christopher, where do you think that we're overspending on the budget?
Specifically in two places, one being the Department of Public Works, which receives 63% of our city's budget. The things that they cover, the parks and infrastructure, streets and stuff like that, it's apparent that there's a inferiority as far as their production. And so I believe that, again, accounting is the top issue with our city government. The city of New Orleans just isn't a legislative body, but it's also a municipal corporation, which should be doing business as a municipal corporation for the benefit of the people. Another area that I believe is overfunded is Sewerage and Water Board. We have spent a lot of money, wasted obviously, on a century-old system. We are squandering money on repairing a 70-year-old turbines. What we should be doing is, well, it's actually going to take about $72 billion to redo our entire drainage infrastructure. So I believe that we should be planning or putting forth plans to work on that.
All right, and Mr. Nowak.
Well, certainly Councilman Williams is correct as far as what we're spending on our incarceration state. New Orleans Police Department gets about 63% of the general fund budget, and we have the highest incarceration rate in the world, and we're having crime surge across the board. So obviously that's not making us safer. I do have proposals on how to attract better police officers. It doesn't just necessitate giving them more money. I've proposed the NOPD Scholars Program where they can continue their education, get a higher degree paid for by the city in response for their service. But when we're talking about what's under budgeted, certainly everything across the board infrastructure-wise. I mean, we're spending $5–6 million a year on street maintenance. We need at least about $50 million, what I've seen from recent estimates, just to maintain our roads as they are. So, you know, maintaining what we have instead of letting it decay, that's a first start. But then beyond, we need to be replacing our dated equipment instead of repairing it, as Mr. Christopher said.
All right, we are running a little tight on time, so this last question, 45 seconds for the responses. We're going to close with this question from our partners at the Committee for a Better New Orleans. There are mandates for a comprehensive, community-based neighborhood participation structure in the city charter, the master plan, and a resolution at the City Council. So what role will you take in making sure the next administration follows those mandates and implements a strong, inclusive citizen participation program? And Mr. Baird, we'll start with you.
Well, I think right now we've got to take a look at that master plan and also all the ordinances that we have on the books. So I'm going to say that I would encourage our citizens to take a look at every single ordinance that we've got on the books that go all the way back to the beginning of time. And then we need to take a look at possibly sunsetting the ones that don't make any sense anymore, because there are ordinances on the books that go all the way back some that even affect the Liberty Monument that go on Canal Street that is still in effect. And so I would encourage getting that citizens committee together, take a look at every single ordinance that's on the books, and sunset those that have no bearing whatsoever anymore. Mr.
Christopher.
Well, I believe that technology is the key to bringing forth a better community engagement. In the past, I worked at Apple, and I've had done some work as a systems administrator at NASA, so I got to see what technology does firsthand. And so I believe that if we invest more into technology, particularly in our schools, so for example, in the school system that we have, there's not one college or university in the city of New Orleans that offers online programs. I think that's something that we should address, but more particularly with city government, improve and invest more in technology, information technology.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Nowak?
When it comes to citizen participation in government, obviously that is the root of the empowerment of anyone that's on the city council. But too often you call city council, you get bounced from department to department. Nobody really seems to know who you're supposed to talk to. And I think that needs to change first and foremost to get people more involved. Calling City Hall, dealing with City Hall shouldn't be an all-day affair. What I would like to do is actually have a program, Office of City Liaison, where people can communicate directly to them so that they can connect them to whatever city department that they need to talk to or whatever city service that they may qualify for. Also, when we're talking about technology, I like the idea of open source like Wikipedia or Mozilla Firefox. You have a community of programmers who design those programs. You can extend that to city services and transparencies, budgets, et cetera.
All right, and Mr. Williams.
I've talked to Mr. Twitchell quite a bit about this, and I think he's right. There's a lot of people in public service who see that sort of citizen participation as a burden. I see it as an asset. I see it as tools in a toolbox, but you need the mayor's office to see it that way and bake it into every single thing that happens. Before you come up with the idea, you have citizen participation involved in the creation of the idea. So I think it's an awesome endeavor.
All right, you guys. Well, we are going to end with a little bit of a lightning round. These questions, I'm looking for a yes or a no answer. So first question, should marijuana be legalized as a way to raise revenue for the city? We'll start on this end.
I've seen it work in Colorado, absolutely.
So that's a yes.
Absolutely, part of my platform.
Absolutely, and it could perhaps save the state budget as well.
Sure.
All right, that was easy. So should the city's traffic and speed cameras be abolished, Mr. Nowak?
Absolutely, part of my platform.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, if your first question becomes law, then we could do that because we can afford it.
All right. Would you support the removal of more Confederate monuments or street or place names?
I don't believe that that's priority at the time. We have greater issues than that, but I would consider public opinion on that.
Okay, so maybe.
I support Musician Circle, and I'd say no.
I'm going to listen to the people, and the people are talking about possibility of Hurricane Nate. They're talking about streets. They're talking about jobs. They're talking about safety. So that's way down on the list.
Okay.
I think the conversation needs to continue, for sure.
All right, some hard maybes. So we also want to ask you to give some letter grades on the next few responses. And how would you grade the performance of Mayor Mitch Landrieu? We'll start on this end. Letter grade.
It's pretty low. I'm sorry.
Can you give me a letter?
It's below C.
All right.
I'd have to say I, incomplete. There are some very big final exams in the Gulf of Mexico right now, and we're going to have to see what happens there.
All right.
I would give his first term a B when he had Mary Landrieu in the Senate to help him out. Second term, D-.
C.
Okay. The current city council, Mr. Christopher.
C.
Oh.
All right.
I'd give a C as well.
I'm a little partial to this.
All right. No letter grade?
No letter grade.
Little self-assessment?
You can't grade yourself.
All right.
People grade me.
D+.
All righty. Okay, we are going to move on to closing statements right now, and we will begin with Mr. Baird, 45 seconds apiece.
Well, I'm running for city council because I'd like to bring something other than the status quo to city government. I believe that we need new leadership, new initiatives here in the city, and also we need to streamline our government. If you look at our population trend over the last couple of years, it is kind of troubling. We've lost some residents between 2015 and 2016. And if you look at our burden for taxation, it's going to go up over the next few years because of our sewer and water board problems. So those kind of troubling issues mean we have to reimagine our government, we've got to reimagine our city, and we've got to be able to bring good leadership here to the city, and we've got to be able to be happy in a city that troubles should not forget.
All right, Mr. Christopher.
My name is Aaron Christopher. I'm number 54 on the ballot, and I'm running for the youth, for our children, because, you know, with all of the issues that are going on with our city government, we don't know what's going to happen 10 or 15 years from now. So we need to be prepared for that right this moment, and we need to have a sense of urgency with that. So I'm running for the betterment, to serve the community, for the betterment of the community. And I've just asked for your vote for that.
All right, Mr. Nowak, 45 seconds.
Number 56 on the ballot. I'm running, been a homeowner in New Orleans since 2002. At 34 years old, I've lived more of my life in the 21st century than the 20th century, and I'm specifically running on a 21-point platform for 21st century New Orleans, because too often in our city we've been doing things 20th, 19th, 18th century policy, and it's time for us to change or to become irrelevant in the next 100 years, because the city, any hurricane that comes in the Gulf, I'm worried it's going to be the last one we'll see.
And Mr. Williams.
I'm Jason Williams. I am your current City Council President. I'm number 57 on the ballot, the same number as Ricky Jackson when it was hard being a saint. I've been fighting for the people of this city in courts all my professional life. I brought that fight to City Hall to fight for all the citizens, and I have been doing that every single day that I've been there. And I know there's so much more to be done, and I'm ready to do it. The one thing I'll tell you, and I think it was very clear, after that flooding in July and August, I proved that I was not afraid to ask the tough questions. I did not go to City Hall to make friends. I did not go to City Hall to become popular. I went there to make a difference, and I'm not done doing that yet.
All right, Mr. Williams, thank you, and thank you to all four of you for coming on. We do want to thank also the Committee for a Better New Orleans for their help with our program tonight. The next Wednesday at the same time, we will host our one-hour debate between the top candidates for Mayor of New Orleans, and we hope you'll join us next Wednesday at 6 p.m. for that. And a reminder, early voting continues all this week. Election Day is October 14th. Thank you for joining us, and have a great night.